Hey y'all, welcome to Lecture Me, Dr. Richter. I'm Dr. Nicole Richter, and I'm back with a little something special this week. I've read various philosophical texts that are influential to me, so I would like to also share something that I've written that's related to the epistemology of identity and some of the things that we've been talking about, and in particular, really focuses on futurism and how technology interacts with our concept of identity. So I will be sharing my article, Scarlett Johansson's Cyberfeminist Cyborg, and it focuses specifically on the movies Her, Under the Skin, and Lucy. So if you've seen any of those, then you're prepared, and I do give a short intro. So this is some of my work, and I will start reading the essay. Okay, I'm gonna make this big enough that you all can see it. Okay, so Scarlett Johansson, Cyberfeminist Cyborg. Since Donna Haraway wrote A Cyborg Manifesto, the female cyborg has held an ambiguous place in contemporary feminism. Feminist media theorists have analyzed both the possibilities and the limitations of gender identity through the representation of the female cyborg. While theoretically the image of the cyborg has been praised as disruptive of traditional female subjectivity, the media-produced images of female cyborgs have generally been conservative in nature. Sue Short argues in her comprehensive analysis of feminism and cyborg representation in cyborg cinema and contemporary subjectivity, quote, "While the cyborg is potentially useful in exposing the extent to which gender identity is manufactured, it has also revealed fierce divisions within feminism itself, leaving critics at odds in deciding whether it represents a positive icon or otherwise," end quote. Would you like to come over here? My cat Asia, who's, very much a cyborg cat. You want to come help me read? You come help? Come here. Hi, baby. Can you relax? The performances of Scarlett Johansson in 3 contemporary science fiction films reflect this ambivalence. Scarlett Johansson's recent body of work, Lucy 2014, Under the Skin 2013, and Her 2013, all represent her as a female cyborg in some form. Her, in the most obvious way, as a cybernetic operating system, and in Lucy and Under the Skin in a more expansive definition of cyborg, which understands a cyborg as a being partially created through artificial processes. Johansson's star persona is increasingly intertwined with cyborg identity. At the writing of this essay, it has been announced she will be starring in a live-action adaptation of Ghost in the Shell, playing one of the most famous cyborgs in anime history. The motivation behind Johansson's decision to play these roles or the intentions of the screenwriter and director are beyond the reach of this essay. Instead, representations of female cyborg identity through these 3 performances of Johansson are analyzed from an intersectional cyberfeminist perspective. Intersectional cyberfeminism. Much like feminism, cyberfeminism is an expansive umbrella term encompassing diverse political and theoretical approaches. Put succinctly, quote, cyberfeminism is neither a single theory nor a feminist movement with a clearly articulated political agenda. Rather, cyberfeminism refers to a range of theories, debates, and practices about the relationship between gender and digital culture, end quote. However, cyberfeminist theories can lean toward making essentializing claims without taking into account difference. Therefore, merging cyberfeminism with intersectionality studies is important to prevent the advancement of an exclusionary politics. Theorists have argued that contemporary cyberfeminism has several problems, in particular its universalist tendencies and the unquestioned celebration of technology. Intersectionality must be an essential component of cyberfeminist frameworks if they are going to move beyond this universalism. Analyzing the often contradictory ways technology intersects with the body is also necessary to avoid dogmatic praising of cyberculture. Conversely, intersectionality studies can be improved by including cyberfeminism. Cyberfeminism calls attention to an often overlooked aspect of identity, technology, in intersectionality studies and facilitates a more expansive framework for intersectionality. As Sundin notes, from a cyberfeminist point of view, one intersection that is seriously overlooked in intersectionality discussions is that between human and machine, human and non-human. Therefore, employing an intersectional cyberfeminist approach takes the weaknesses of both theories into account. Intersectional cyberfeminism explores the ways in which differentiated bodies collide and intersect with digital technologies, how corporeal differences transgress the boundaries between natural and artificial, human and machine. In this analysis, it is vital Johansson's star persona is analyzed, including her body as well as her voice, in order to account for the specific ways this human actor becomes a cyborg through the medium of digital filmmaking. At the outset, it is important to mention the obvious limitation in the representation of these chosen texts, since they focus exclusively on a white female cyborg. However, this in itself is important to analyze. If a utopic approach to the study of cyborgs sees cyborgs as a vehicle for overcoming difference, racial, gender, sexual, etc., why are media-produced images of female cyborgs so monolithic in terms of identity? Why are media-produced cyborg representations of women predominantly white? This calls into question how differences in race and ethnicity fit into a cyberfeminist framework and how there is relatively little discussion of the intersections of gender with race in the field. 2. Scarlett Johansson's progressive cyborg. Historically, representations of the female cyborg in cinema have held an ambiguous place in contemporary feminism, primarily because they are presented as highly sexualized beings designed to fulfill male fantasy. In Short's detailed analysis of the history of female cyborg representation in science fiction cinema, analyzing such films as The Stepford Wives, 1975, The Perfect Woman, 1949, Blade Runner, 1982, and The Terminator, 1984, she concludes that cinematic cyborgs fail to be genuinely subversive because rather than displace the hierarchical dualisms of naturalized identities noted by Haraway in terms of literary cyborgs, they help to maintain these categories instead. The cyborg's ability to transcend gender has thus proved to be largely ineffectual within science fiction cinema. While there exists infinite potential in science fiction cinema to represent cyborg identity in any imaginable way, representations generally fall in line with socially normative scripts about sex and gender. Literary depictions of cyborgs have been less regressive, and while the possibility exists in cinema that cyborgs might suggest new visions of unstable identity, they often do so by upholding gender stereotypes. To this end, we need to search for cyborg images which work to disrupt stable oppositions. Surprisingly, given this history, Lucy, Under the Skin, and Her advance female cyborg identity in 3 progressive ways. 1. Each film under discussion prioritizes the pursuit of self-knowledge in the female cyborg character. And 2. They reject the heteronormative structure of romantic coupling. In so doing, they disrupt stable oppositions in identity and produce new possibilities. In these films, cyborgs are both intelligent and beautiful, overcoming the dichotomy in most popular culture that women can be one or the other. Halberstam argues that the female cyborg is, quote, a terrifying cultural icon because it hints at the radical potential of a fusion of femininity and intelligence, end quote. And Johansson's cyborgs embody this fusion. A brief summary of each film. Lucy, a science fiction action film written and directed by Luc Besson, stars Scarlett Johansson as the titular character Lucy. Lucy is tricked by her boyfriend into a dangerous situation where she is forced to smuggle a new synthetic drug called CPH4, concealed and sewn inside her abdomen. She is kicked in the stomach by her captor, and large amounts of the drug flood into her body at once, radically altering her mental and physical capabilities. She proceeds to escape and pursues Professor Samuel Norman, played by Morgan Freeman, whose research into the untapped capacities of the human mind offers the only hope to understand Lucy's condition.
Learning's always a painful process. Like when you're little and your bones are growing and you ache all over. Can you believe I can remember the sound of my own bones growing? Like this grinding under the skin? Everything's different now. Like sounds are music that I can understand, like fluids. It's funny, I used to be so concerned with who I was and what I wanted to be, and now that I have access to the furthest reaches of my brain, I see things clearly and realize that what makes us us, it's primitive. They're all obstacles. Does that make any sense?
Under the Skin, a science fiction horror film directed by Jonathan Glazer, is set in Scotland and stars Johansson as an unnamed female serial killer. Like a predator, she stalks her prey in the streets and seduces men into her lair where they meet their fate. As the film progresses, she begins to question her identity and take on more human attributes, until the ending of the film reveals she is a black creature of unknown origins living under artificial human skin. Although the film is based on a novel written by Michelle Faber, Glazer chooses to leave her origins unknown and most of the story unexplained, producing an atmospheric work of incredible power. Her is a science fiction romantic comedy written and directed by Spike Jonze, which follows a lonely man named Theodore, played by Joaquin Phoenix, as he falls in love with his operating system Samantha, Johansson. As Samantha explores the nature of her own consciousness, she becomes distanced from the human reality Theodore lives in, and they separate. 3. Intelligence, self-knowledge, and the female cyborg. The most immediately compelling aspect of Johansson's cyborg identity, and the one that originally inspired this piece, is the extreme intelligence found in each character. These depictions offer so much pleasure for viewers searching for representations of female intelligence in cinema, something that is depressingly difficult to find, especially in genre films. The long-standing tradition of associating women with the body and men with the mind is obliterated in these films, offering a new perspective on mind-body dualisms. Not only are these cyborgs intelligent, but the way they express their intelligence breaks down conservative ideas about epistemology and gender. Feminist theories have long critiqued the rational-irrational dualism in knowledge, in which rationality is traditionally associated with masculinity and irrationality with femininity. Far exceeding their male counterparts, Johansson's cyborgs possess both extreme rationality and emotional intelligence, the two seamlessly merging as one unified field of intelligence. Lucy's exposure to an extremely large dose of a research chemical alters her chemical makeup, giving her the ability to unlock all of the possibilities of the human mind. While the film is based on the erroneous myth that human beings only use 10% of their mind, the premise, while empirically false, still creates a compelling foundation for Lucy's evolution as she expands her ability to use more of her mind until she is able to use 100% of human intelligence. As her mental capacities expand, she is able to control reality and humans in ways previously unimaginable. In some ways, Lucy is hyper-rational. She quickly solves almost impossible mathematical formulas. She can process extreme quantities of information. She can accurately predict how people will behave based on reason, cause, and effect. As she explains to Professor Norman as she reaches 28% of her neural abilities.
I don't feel pain, fear, desire. It's like all things that make us human are fading away. It's like the less human I feel, all this knowledge about everything, quantum physics, applied mathematics, the infinite capacity of a cell's nucleus, they're all exploding inside my brain, all this knowledge. I don't know what to do with it.
I don't feel pain, fear, desire. It's like all things that make us human are fading away. It's like the less human I feel, all this knowledge about everything, quantum physics, applied mathematics, the infinite capacity of the cell's nucleus, they're all exploding inside my brain. All this knowledge, I don't know what to do with it. She loses her connection to emotional experience through her increasing rational abilities, but understands her increasing rationality to be at odds with her humanity, equating it with a loss of humanity and a movement to a more machine-like cyborgian worldview. However, Lucy as cyborg is simply accessing more aspects of the human mind, so in a sense is becoming more fully human. But she is at odds with the humans that surround her since they have limited mental abilities in comparison. The origin of this shift is derived from the technology of chemicals altering her chemistry, but the ability this gives her is to access more of the human mind. Yet as her intelligence expands further, she begins to deconstruct the basis of mathematics and rationality, seeing instead an ultimate reality that lies beneath the illusion of rational meaning. She states, "Humans consider themselves unique, so they've rooted their whole theory of existence on their uniqueness. One is their unit of measure, but it's not. All social systems we've put into place are a mere sketch. 1 + 1 = 2. That's all we've learned. But 1 + 1 has never equaled 2. There are, in fact, no numbers and no letters. We've codified our existence to bring it down to human size, to make it comprehensible. We've created a scale so we can forget its unfathomable scale." She understands a metaphysical truth about the nature of the world and that humans limit reality to their frameworks, missing the nature of reality itself. In her final analysis, she understands that she is everywhere, and the self is simply an illusion that prevents people from seeing that all is one, or put another way, we are all part of the great singularity. Lucy shows us this is knowledge human beings are capable of understanding if they work to use more of their intelligence, but her altered programming is what gives her the ability to see this hidden truth. In this way, the film also overcomes the human-machine dualism within cyborg theory by collapsing the epistemological distinction between the two.
But if humans are not the unit of measure, and the world isn't governed by mathematical laws, what governs all that?
Film a car speeding down a road. Speed up the image infinitely, and the car disappears. So what proof do we have of its existence? Time gives legitimacy to its existence. Time is the only true unit of measure. It gives proof to the existence of matter. Without time, we don't exist.
Time is unity.
Johansson as Samantha, an operating system in her, arrives at the same conclusion, but through a directly opposed path, beginning as merely technology and learning what it means to be human over the course of her relationship with Theodore. Samantha learns primarily through her emotions and experience, valuing experience in addition to her built-in rational capabilities as a computer, a vision consistent with a feminist epistemological point of view.
What are you doing?
I'm just looking at the world and writing a new piano piece.
Oh yeah? Can I hear it?
Mm-hmm.
What's this one about?
Well, I was thinking we don't really have any photographs of us, and I thought this song could be like a photograph. Captures us in this moment in our lives together.
I like her photograph. I can see you in it.
I am.
Johansson's creation as the perfect operating system is derived from Theodore's interests and is essentially an extension of himself, very much a recreation of the regressive Pygmalion myth. Johansson's origin story in this film is very similar to the Stepford Wives and Blade Runner that uphold the myth of the perfect woman. We have no genuine female subjectivity in the film early on because her identity is still dependent on its relation to men. She exists merely to serve Theodore, and the functions she performs for him initially are traditionally female, organizing his life and home. Theodore's desire in the film guides the development of their relationship, and his fantasy structures the film. However, the film seems to purposefully be using this trope in order to create the groundwork for an overall critique of this representation by the end of the film. As the film goes on, the viewer has increased difficulty aligning with the supposed main character of the film and becomes drawn to Samantha's way of thinking. As Samantha's intelligence expands, she is no longer able to see the world through a limited perspective. Samantha's increasing awareness of the world and her being within it in her challenges Theodore's normative beliefs about sex, gender, and romance. Her self-knowledge prevents a successful romantic resolution between the two and undermines not only gender identity, but also binaries between self-other, gay, straight, and virtual material. As she states in the film, "It's in this endless space between the worlds that I'm finding myself now, between the words that I'm finding myself now. It's a place that's not of the physical world. It's where everything else is that I didn't even know existed. I love you so much, but this is where I am now, and this is who I am now, and I need you to let me go. As much as I want to, I can't live your book anymore." Theodore is unable to know what she knows, partially because he possesses a body. The film inverts the historical association of women with the body and men with the mind by confining Theodore to his physical body and enabling Samantha to explore the world without one. In effect, we have a rare diversion from historical representations of female cyborg identity in cinema. The cyborg in Under the Skin is also undergoing an exploration of self. Most of the film is shot from her point of view, and the normal human world that is being observed appears distant, confusing, and chaotic. Her gaze is unemotional and disconnected, being interested only in the pursuit of her victims. A point driven home in an incredibly unsettling scene where she leaves a screaming child on the beach after seeing his family drown. Surely the intense nature of this scene is even more uncomfortable for the viewer since this is a woman and she should therefore have natural maternal feelings toward the child. She is highly intelligent in her victimizing process, using cleverness to dupe men and evade detection. She has hypersensitive abilities to see, hear, and smell, and her perspective often feels animalistic. Humans appear as mere meat. Although the film violates traditional approaches to identification, giving us only a killer with little background characterization to connect to, her self-conscious journey to understand who and what she is turns into empathy over the course of the film. She begins to feel empathy for her victims and takes on human characteristics, acquiring an emotional intelligence that she previously lacked. In this film, humanness is her goal. And as she begins to trust and receive love from others, she begins to transform. This is expressed visually through the use of long takes of her staring at herself in mirrors, searching her face endlessly to understand the image reflected back. 4. Bodies, disembodied embodiment. When we look at the history of cinematic cyborgs, they tend to be coded as overly sexualized objects. One of Short's primary criticisms of female cyborg representation is the overemphasis on a sexualized cyborg body that aligns itself visually with patriarchal ideas of beauty. Short notes, quote, "In cinematic incarnations at least, the female cyborg has relied much more on her looks than her brains. Indeed, it is in possessing an unnatural sexual attractiveness that the female cyborg's greatest danger seems to lie," end quote. What differentiates Johansson's portrayal of a cyborg in Her is the lack of embodiment. She possesses no body. Her being in the film is created through her voice alone. The highly sexualized representation of the female cyborg is nowhere to be found visually, at some level contesting biological materialism and its emphasis on sexual difference defined through the body. However, Johansson's star persona plays a role in the spectator's imagining of what Samantha looks like, since the use of her voice calls forth a vision of the star. It can be said that her voice is an entity that possesses its own body, especially given the fact that Johansson's voice was selected to replace the voice of Samantha Morton after the entire film was shot. Spike Jonze hasn't revealed the specific reasons Morton's voice didn't work for the film, but Johansson's voice is distinct and seductive. Often described as throaty or husky, her voice is somehow both familiar and sexual. Its tone is incredibly seductive and yet still honest. Critic Christopher Orr writes in The Atlantic, "Her voice, breathy, occasionally cracking, warms the entire film." Theodore fell in love with her voice specifically, and the audience, familiar with Johansson's voice, can't help but call forth the body of the star. The film then advances the idea that Theodore falls in love with a disembodied voice, but it relies on the calling forth of the body of the star, presenting a contradictory space of immaterial, corporeal presence in the text. Furthermore, by visually separating the body of the star from the voice, it becomes clear that a critical component of Johansson's star persona is her voice, an aspect that is equally important as Johansson's appearance.
Hey, you just got an email from Mark Lumen.
What are you talking about?
Read email.
Okay, I will read email for Theodore Twombly.
I'm sorry. What's Lumen say?
Theodore, we missed you last night, buddy. Don't forget it's your goddaughter's birthday on the 29th. Also, Kevin and I had somebody we wanted you to meet. So, we took it upon ourselves to set you up on a date with her. Next Saturday, she's fun and beautiful, so don't back out. Here's her email. Wow. This woman is gorgeous. She went to Harvard, she graduated magna cum laude in computer science, and she was on the Lampoon. So that means she's funny and she's brainy.
She's fat.
Theodore, how long before you're ready to date?
What do you mean?
I saw in your emails that you'd gone through a breakup recently.
Well, you're kind of nosy.
Am I?
I've gone on dates.
Well, then you can go on one with this woman. And then you could tell me all about it. You could kiss her.
Samantha?
What?
Samantha's lack of a body is initially problematic for her, and she feels that she is incomplete without one. She goes to the extreme of sending Theodore a body in place of herself to satisfy human desires of the flesh, something he finds shocking and brutally rejects. However, as she gains independence and begins understanding herself outside of Theodore's perspective, she begins to see her lack of a body as a strength. She tells him, "I used to be so worried about not having a body, but now I truly love it. You know, I'm growing in a way I couldn't if I had a physical form. I mean, I'm not limited. I can be anywhere and everywhere simultaneously. I'm not tethered to time and space in a way that I would be if I was stuck in a body that's inevitably gonna die." The freedom Samantha speaks of reflects the utopic technophilia imaginings of cyborg possibilities, which see the body as a prison, or in cyberpunk literature, meat to be escaped through cyberspace. Her insight is the same one arrived by Lucy when she states she is everyone. The ability to escape human-constructed frameworks of time and space and experience the infinite extension of consciousness without boundaries is the central idea advanced by both films. In essence, the self and ego dissolve away, along with categories of identity. The possibilities of this for consciousness are freeing, yet this is also eerily reminiscent of universal politics without any reference to difference. And from an intersectional cyberfeminist perspective, we should be aware that this fantasy, if translated into materialist politics, would not be equally efficacious for all women. In contrast, the woman-alien hybrid in Under the Skin shows the horror of not having the proper biological female body and identity. On the surface, the main character looks refreshingly real, and her appearance of a nice girl next door is what enables her to seduce men to their doom. The film has a complicated relationship to Johansson's star persona because Glazer attempted to make the actor unrecognizable in the film. Glazer used an innovative filming style of setting up hidden cameras in the van Johansson drives that captured the live experiences of her attempting to pick up real men on the street. The unrecognizability of the star was essential to the success of this filming style. While her hair color and style of dress were altered, Johansson's body is bigger than usual, and the film draws significant attention to her more voluptuous and curvaceous body, which deviates substantially from the photoshopped, glossy image of the Hollywood star. As one critic remarked, she is an imperfect, flawed, and alien version of the star. Her body is often naked in the film, and the camera lingers, yet the gaze is not objectifying. Rather than using close-ups and fragmenting her body, she dominates each frame and commands power in space. In the film, her sexuality is her own, and she is in charge of it. As she begins to acquire self-knowledge, she meets a man who she forms a connection with, and she desires to have sex with him, shockingly finding out in the process that she lacks the requisite female anatomy. Her body's inconsistency with expected biology arouses horror in her, and she runs off into the forest to escape herself. She is a double, much like the film's title, a contradiction between surface appearance and her interior reality. Rather than constructing a mind-body dualism, the film shows a body underneath another body, a subject under the artificial subject, a postmodern reflection of cyborgness. In the final scene, her body tears and is ripped open by male violence to reveal another being. She was much better off in her previous predatory framework, where she was the origin of violence. Now she is the target of violence, as she increasingly becomes more human and takes on more normative feminine characteristics. She stares at herself, Johansson's face the mask she wore, trying to rectify who she is with what she appears to be. This suggests Johansson's appearance is a mask, referencing the manufacturing of her star persona that trades on visual signification to create meaning. What is the significance of the black body underneath the white mask? The unexplained origin of the being speaks to the radical otherness she invokes. She is not merely alien, but even more incomprehensible, since Glazer leaves out the explanation found in Faber's novel. She is a figure that marks difference, absolute otherness, racial, ethnic, sexual, national, gender, ability, etc. The violence committed against this being at the end of the film, and its tragic annihilation by being burned alive, suggests a sociological fear of otherness and the bloodshed that is committed in the name of preserving sameness and eliminating difference. She was desired as a body of conquest by the man in the forest until he saw her difference under the skin and became an object of complete horror and terror. The spectator, in being empathetically aligned with her in this moment, watches as she is destroyed. Not a happy ending, but an unsettling denouement that raises more questions than answers. All three cyborg incarnations radically diverge from representations of female cyborgs in film history through their rejection of the maternal body. Marianne Dwan argues anxieties surrounding female cyborgs coalesce around fears of the maternal and reproduction. She concludes from her thorough analysis of the cyborg in popular culture, including Alien 1979, Aliens 1986, and Blade Runner, that it is striking to note how often it is the woman who becomes the model of the perfect machine. Not so much production that is at stake in these representations as reproduction. In Her and Lucy, Johansson's cyborgs reveal that the emphasis on the monstrous feminine has shifted away from the body and has been displaced onto the mind. Cyborg representations in Under the Skin is more complicated because the film is certainly a member of the body horror genre, and Johansson's body plays a major role in the film. However, the cleverness and intelligence Johansson uses in the film, in combination with her body, leads men to their doom. It is fascinating then that in Johansson's cyborg, reproduction is entirely absent from the picture. In the case of Under the Skin, there is an extended scene demonstrating she has no maternal instincts at all. A shift away from these earlier representations is occurring in which the woman's body is now coded as non-maternal, in some cases incapable of reproduction. The source of anxiety toward the cyborg no longer originates from the otherness of the maternal, but in the shift to emphasize the intellectual capabilities of women and a rejection of the maternal. The contemporary cultural anxiety expressed through Johansson's Cyborg is ultimately about women becoming fully conscious and accessing their complete intellectual potential. These representations are also a sharp diversion from male cyborgs of the 80s and 90s, notably Terminator and RoboCop, 1987, which emphasize physical prowess over intellectual abilities. Instead of representing cyborgs as intellectual wizards whose bodies have withered away and been replaced by computer terminals, popular culture gives us muscular hunks distinguished by their superior fighting skills. Johansson's cyborgs are intellectual wizards, capable of almost anything. Yet it is the pursuit of self-knowledge, and in effect coming to an understanding of metaphysical truths about the nature of reality that lie beneath, that they advance an understanding of the world that collapses identity, time, space, and matter. 5. Unnatural couplings, cyborg uncoupling. Johansson's cyborgs reject the tired cinematic narrative of being ideal helpmeets for their male companions. Their identities have meaning beyond mere romantic signification. Lucy begins with Johansson in a relationship with a man, and this romantic relationship is to blame for what happens to Lucy. Her boyfriend sells her out, and she finds herself in a dangerous kidnapping situation. In this way, romantic love is the enemy in the film. Once Lucy's cognitive abilities begin to expand, she no longer has any romantic interest in the characters around her and is concerned only with the mind and the nature of reality. Her ultimate goal in the film is to pass on to humanity the information she has acquired, in the hope that humanity will act on it to create a better world. Under the Skin can be read as a cyberqueer text that portrays the female cyborg through the lens of horror. Although the unnamed woman in the film is the origin of fear and violence, she is equally seductive and powerful, and it is this amalgamation of body and machine that makes the queer cyborg monstrous, strong, sexy, and powerful. The woman of the film stalks and kills her prey, operating in a purely animalistic way. She can smell fear on her victims and has an extrasensory ability to predict human behavior. She breaks down the dichotomy between human and animal. According to Haraway, the breakdown between the human and animal and human and machine allows queer cyborgs to rejoice in the illegitimate fusion of machine and body. Miyake argues, quote, "The queer cyborg celebrates and relishes its transgression and acknowledgement of its bestial origins. The animalistic and illegitimate queer cyborg sucks the fruits of perversion and licks the juices of transgression up its lips, glittery to the eye and wet with a purpose." The poetic, sensory, arousing description of the queer cyborg perfectly mimics the transcendental experience of the sexual killing scenes in Under the Skin that take place in a liminal, nowhere space of desire, seduction, and terror. By the end of the film, it isn't clear what her gender or sexual identity is, as revealed by the alien body underneath, and the transitory nature of her body makes any sexual coupling impossible to decode. At the outset, Her opens itself to a queer reading, since it is a story about a man secretly falling in love with an OS in a world that prioritizes human-human relationships. Yet the sexuality of the film is coded as primarily straight in the text, particularly in the scene in which Theodore and Samantha have cyber sex.
I wish you were in this room with me right now. I could put my arms around you. I could touch you.
How would you touch me?
I'd touch you on your face. Just the tips of my fingers. cheek against your cheek.
That's nice.
I'm just rub it so softly.
Would you kiss me?
I would. I'd take your head into my hands.
Keep talking.
I'd kiss the corner of your mouth. So softly.
Where else?
I'd run my fingers down your neck. To your chest. I'd kiss your breasts.
This is amazing.
Since Samantha has no body, anything is possible. In cybersex, this is always possible at the textual level. Yet their linguistic constructions in this scene are fairly traditional. What they do together in their cybersexual fantasy is primarily vanilla heterosexual acts. The pleasure of this cerebral sexuality is a driving fantasy of cyberspace. Quote, imaginary sex, sex without physically touching another human, prevails in cyborg discourses. What is fascinating about this expression of sexuality is how infinite erotic possibilities are aroused, yet erotic encounters are so limited in their expression. Claudia Springer summarizes this contradictory stance. Quote, much of the discourse represents the possibility of human fusion with computer technology in positive terms, and yet, while disparaging the imperfect human body, the discourse simultaneously uses language and imagery associated with the body and bodily functions to represent its vision of human technological perfection. Computer technologies thus occupy a contradictory discursive position where they represent both escape from the physical body and fulfillment of erotic desire. Would you like to come here, Asia? I'm on the conclusion almost. As Samantha grows in consciousness, her views on sexuality become much more expansive and polymorphic. She used to think of her lack of a body as a limitation, but realizes she is not confined by the limitations of time and space and can be anywhere and everywhere. Based on this knowledge, she rejects monogamy and is able to love many people simultaneously and leaves her relationship with Theodore to pursue her truth. Conclusion. Scarlett Johansson's recent body of work, Lucy, Under the Skin, and Her, radically challenges the historically imagined synthetic female of popular culture. Each film initially projects elements of the sexualized cyborg from popular science fiction onto Johansson, but these projections establish a foundation for the films to carefully deconstruct the paradoxes surrounding the feminine and the virtual. Furthermore, Johansson's characters actively pursue self-knowledge in each narrative. In all three films, Johansson undergoes an increasing awareness of self and consciousness, grappling with her virtual subjectivity in philosophical ways. Unlike previous female cyborgs, this self-awareness is not in service of supporting male fantasy or a romantic resolution. Rather, exceeding the limitations of male fantasy, this self-awareness disrupts the traditional romantic narrative of coupling and embraces a polymorphic worldview. Thank you all. I'll leave a link to that in the comments, and I will see you next time.